And I always share with people because it is easy to see somebody. I have conquered a lot of trail races and have done some cool stuff. But my first 5K, dude, took me almost an hour. And I tell people that, and they're kind of like blown away. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and was good at running. It takes a lot of work, a lot of showing up. And no matter where you are in your journey, to just show up and start wherever you are. I think a lot of times people don't start because they're like, oh, I could never run a 5K in 20 minutes. So then they never do it. And I like to remind people that, my first 5K, I was walking, taking breaks. It hurt, but I kept coming back.
Welcome to the Safe Space Running Podcast. We're here to encourage, enable, and empower. My next guest, I had the true privilege of meeting down at TRE earlier, well, not early this year, late last year, actually. Zach Friedley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. It does seem like TRE wasn't that long ago, but it was like almost 6 months ago.
I know, right? It was my first time ever being in any kind of environment of that nature. A lot of times I'm do a lot of local stuff here, whether it be, local program stuff, but I've never been to anything of that nature. And I had the privilege of sitting through you guys' discussion with Rising Hearts. And that's where we had the first interaction for it. And you was already pretty cool. But before I get to how cool you are, which you don't really need me for, what do you have personally planned on your racing schedule? Do you have any big events or so you're training for right now?
Yeah, well, I'm racing some trail stuff this summer. I'm doing Broken Arrow, and I'm doing a UTMB finals week in Chamonix. I'm doing a race called ETC, but my big races for me personally are going to be Chicago and New York City this fall.
Oh, nice.
I'm trying to put together a fast-ish marathon. So I've been working on it for a while, and we got some prosthetics that we're developing and fine tuning. So those are my A races.
Nice. I will hopefully get to see you in New York. I did Chicago last year. I love
Sick.
Chicago. I'm trying to knock out my majors. So New York is next on my bucket list. I'm truly excited to go down there and experience all that is New York and then some. I heard it's phenomenal.
New York was my first marathon, actually. I've done it twice now. I did 24 and 25, and this will be my third.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think it might be my favorite event, period. Just the way the community shows up there. Like they say 1 million people come to cheer you on. And from my perspective, it's just all these different cultures coming together, cheering on complete strangers that they don't know. And I just kind of wish humanity would copy that one day for like all the days.
Listen, that's what's, I swear, that's what's, people always ask me why I run, and I always say community. I'm like, oh, it can't be that big of a deal. If you're not in it, it's like, it's a completely different kind of, it's so hard. It's not hard to explain, but it's such a camaraderie and
Totally.
wholesome encouragement. Knock on wood, I've never been in a circumstance where I felt like in a running space, someone was really after me or against me for my detriment. It's always been
Yeah.
such love and positivity, no matter what people's spaces and where they're at. That's what's been so beautiful about
I
this.
agree. Yeah. I mean, I've had some moments in some other countries in the mountain races that weren't as friendly as the New York City Marathon, but overall, I've had a really good experience.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we're so glad to have you even in this space, as I talked about before. I met you down at TRE, and again, you were part of the panel. And I hope I have the term correctly. You're a pro para athlete. Is that correct in the way to say that?
Yeah. Sounds
Perfect.
about right.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to make sure I'm saying my words correctly because words be wording for me. But I thought that was cool. And then when I did some more digging, your accolades and your history and what you've accomplished in this space, it's truly been amazing to say the least. I wanted to kind of dig into that, if that was okay. The one thing that caught my attention, which will lead into my first question, was during some research that I was looking at for you. I know that you was looking to go into the Paralympics for quite some time, and you had mentioned that those things weren't working out, but then you made a pivot to go into trail running. So my first question to you would be, why did you pivot from that? What made you shift from going for the for Paralympics for so long, but then finding, honestly, I don't see how you I hate trail running, but I tend to twist my ankles and roll, but it's like, I feel like that's so much harder, but you've excelled so much greater at that too. Like what was your real reason behind that change?
Well, I tried to make a Paralympic team in 2008 for Beijing and then London, and then I gave up halfway to Rio. And I didn't get my first running blade either until 2007. So I
Wow.
haven't always had a blade, but right after I got it, I decided, hey, I really want to, be in sport and set my sights on Paralympic track and field. But I guess now I can say, fortunately, that it didn't work out. And in 2019, after 5 or 6 years away from sport, trail running found me in the most random way. I had just gotten back from India. I spent some time in India at an ashram and learned how to meditate from this really cool guy named Mahatma Fikirnanji.
Hmm.
And I basically came back from that experience opened up to possibility in the world. And through that whole, like my mind shifted to have just an openness to whatever is coming. And a running opportunity kind of presented itself. And I just said yes. And it found me on a trail at a race in Central California. And I ran the furthest I'd ever ran in my life and changed my life, across the finish line. And had an emotional experience where I was like crying, but happy and just kind of blown away that this sport even existed. And then immediately after that finish, like I'm talking like 30 seconds after I crossed the finish line, my first thought was, why didn't anybody ever tell me that I could trail run? Why am I 35 years old just now
Mm.
experiencing this? So that's kind of what started the nonprofit that I do is, bringing people out onto trails, sending that invite out, the thing that I never really got until my mid 30s.
I, I'm glad you said that because that kind of goes into the next question that I have. But I thought that was when I was listening to that story that you had mentioned. I think you mentioned like you ran 3 miles previously, and then that
Yeah,
race it was a 10 mile race if I'm not mistaken,
exactly,
and
bro.
just it's cool to hear even people. I think sometimes, and forgive me for this perspective, it's like sometimes when we look at people that you've done a lot and we see these people, we sometimes forget they start the same place that we start sometimes. And for a
100%.
lot of people that we come in contact with for their first run, sometimes it's their first mile, and it's like they can't believe they don't believe they can go further than that. But hearing that story and hearing the emotional reaction that you had to it that led as a
Yeah.
catalyst to what you do now was really cool.
Yeah. And I always share with people because it is easy to see somebody, I have conquered a lot of trail races and have done some cool stuff. But my first 5K, dude, took me almost an hour. And I tell people that.
Wow.
And they're kind of like blown away. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and was good at running. It takes a lot of work, a lot of showing up, and no matter where you are in your journey, to just show up and start wherever you are. I think a lot of times people don't start because they're like, "Oh, I could never run a 5K in 20 minutes," so then
Mm.
they never do it. And I like to remind people that, yeah, my first 5K, I was walking, taking breaks. It hurt, but I kept coming back.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just putting one foot in front of the other. I think
Literally.
the more we keep that narrative out can continue to keep the sport inviting for others to do so. And I thought your name for the nonprofit that you started was very interesting. And I know that there's so much more meaning to it, which is my next question. Nonprofit you created was Born to Adapt. And just for those who are listening who are unaware, they help to create different opportunities and race opportunities for adaptive runners, as your website had put it. But your choice of adaptive was very poignant, in my opinion. So I wanted to ask you, what was the meaning behind Born to Adapt, and why do you call your athletes and the runners and walkers that you support adaptive runners or walkers?
Yeah, so I can't take credit for this actually. But I was at the race that I was telling you about, the 10 miles. It's
Mm.
called Born to Run. And there's a really famous book called Born to Run that came out 15 years ago. and it got a lot of people into running. And this event, Born to Run, kind of stemmed from that event or that book. And that race that I did, Luis Escobar, he's the race director of it. And when I told him I wanted to create an event for disabled athletes in trail running, he was helping me figure this out because he's a race director. He's like, "You're basically going to be a race director, and I'll
Mm,
teach you everything I know." So I couldn't figure out what to call it. And then in a text message, he said, "Hey, why don't we call it Born to Adapt?" And I thought that was pretty sick. So it's stuck. And now the brand is, well known throughout the world of trail running.
hmm.
And yeah, so I mean, adaptive athlete, I think I started hearing that term maybe in like 2018. And I don't even know where I heard it from. The language is always evolving. So it's always interesting to see where humanity is with language.
Yeah.
But yeah, adaptive athlete, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, well, that's me, and that was my identity. And, you've heard words, maybe para athlete or disabled athlete. There really isn't a wrong way to describe it. Who knows, maybe one day there'll be a different way, but I thought it was kind of cool to call it Born to Adapt since we're adaptive athletes.
I thought that it made sense because when I thought about it, especially from looking at your journey from, you adapting to the circumstances, you adapting to different races, you adapting again to trail running and making that your own. There's a statement I remember reading in one of the articles where you had mentioned, you didn't see a lot of para athletes on the trail and
No.
how you went out and started to create that opportunity, not only by your own representation, but by creating this organization. I thought was really, really cool to see all of that. And I guess not even a guess, but the next question would be why was that important for you to have that representation out on the trail?
Yeah, I mean, I think my friend quotes this, but you can't be what you can't see. And luckily
Mm,
for me, I was invited, right place, right time. I've been an athlete my whole life, and just being on the trail really impacted me, and it just excited me to get more people from my community out there and basically get on top of the roof and yell, "Hey, you belong out here." And then let them decide how far they want to take it. Maybe they want to just be a Wednesday night group runner, which is super cool to be involved in the community, or maybe they want to be the next UTMB star and be a pro athlete. So I just wanted to create something that allowed people to kind of, you know, on ramp into the community, but also take it as far as they want.
that's really cool to hear. I think, and people who've listened before, I am a huge proponent of representation and how that reflects into the spaces that we have. I think that, and I've talked about it before on the podcast with different guests, but seeing people out there like you makes it that much of a difference. It makes it so much more inviting. It makes it much more welcoming. That
Totally.
representation has always mattered. As speaking as a black male from before, there's plenty of times when I didn't see many people like me out on the course. And
100%.
as the years have changed, there has been so much headway, so many organizations that have been created to help create that equity and that representation and being able to see your quote that you said best, you can't be what you can't see.
Yep.
Seeing that visual aspect of being seen and making sure people see you has such a importance into the sport, especially in trail running as well.
Yeah, I have an example of how this actually went down. So this summer, there was an athlete from Ecuador. His name's Yahir Ramos. He is a para athlete, missing his like below the knees, 21. Him and I met in 2022 when he was 17. I was in Ecuador climbing a big mountain with a group of amputees, and he was one of them. And I was running on the mountain on one of our like training days. And that night, he asked me what I was doing, and he's like, "I've never seen a person with a blade or a prosthetic on a mountain running. What are
Wow.
you doing out there, bro?" And I showed him photos of UTMB. I had just ran MCC that year, my first time. I failed, and I was, training for the next year. And so I showed him some of the photos that On took. We had a film that On made, and I showed it to him as a 17-year-old kid. And he's like, "Dude, I want to run like that. Can you help me?"
Wow.
And then fast forward 3 years from, now last year, he was at the start line of OCC, which is pretty much the Super Bowl of 50Ks. And he finished the race. And now we're looking at getting him in again to do a faster time, but that's his career now is trail running, and that's what visibility can do. It can reach anywhere in the world. So I
Hmm.
often wonder how many other yahirs are out in the world just waiting to see, you know, somebody like them in the mountains, and they're like, "Hey, that's what I want to do."
That's cool. That's that full circle moment says a lot, and I'm impressed that it takes a bit of work and sacrifice on your end to give that opportunity for others. I think it's sometimes underrated. It sounds like, sometimes as good people, it's some second nature to invest into others or to make sure that your representation matters. But there's a lot of people that needs to see that and needs to have that
Totally.
same encouragement. And I'm going to ask that of you, actually, of my next question for you, because I know you do a lot of trail running. I hate trail running. It's like and again, it's my personal preference, but my next question, and this is more of a personal ask, is what really, what brings you joy in running on the trail? Because I know that for me, I'm only thinking of the worst. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I've done a couple trails. I trip on some rocks and roots, and then I'm like, take me home, I'm done. But there's
Yeah.
clearly a joy because I look through your photos and I look through, the stuff that you've accomplished and the people that do trails. There's a beauty in that. So for me, my question is, why trail running? What brings you joy from that activity?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it kinda goes back to being a kid, and I remember
Mm,
myself as a kid. I remember the first time my parents drove to the mountains, and you saw the mountains for the first time, might have been, like, 8 to 10, and you're just like, "Whoa, those are awesome." So, mountains always moved me,
mm.
and it wasn't until my mid-30s where I realized that I could actually run through these things. So, for the longest time, trail running to me has just been exploring something that I didn't necessarily know was possible when I was a kid. So I'm bringing a lot of joy to my like 10-year-old self and seeing things in the Alps, seeing things in the Pyrenees, the Rocky Mountains, the Eastern
Wow.
Sierra of California. So doing these things that pretty much most of my life that I didn't know was possible because certainly nobody in my 20s was inviting me to run a mountain race, And so that was fulfilling to be, in my mid 30s and 40s and crushing things through the Alps, Switzerland, seeing the Matterhorn when you're out running the
Wow.
trail. Like, yeah, I mean, that brought me a lot of joy. But at the same time, I want to tell you that my running's evolved and I don't necessarily feel myself called to mountain running as much as I have in the past. And I'm really feeling called to these road marathons and I'm finding a lot of joy in that. I haven't actually ran on a trail probably since September. We've
Oh,
been
wow.
really dialing in my road skills, and I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Awesome. Well, you're adapting. See what I did there? No.
I'm adapting.
No, I love that you mentioned the aspect about, child, because it thinks, and it could be, I mean, being completely candid, I'm thinking about, me growing up and how much exposure I had to that kind of stuff. You kind of said it best of, how did I know or how did you find out about trail running? People didn't tell you in your 20s or so. I
Totally.
didn't find out about trail running honestly until maybe what 6 7 years ago, and well, I'm 39 now. I've been running for 20 years, but it's like
Yeah.
I I always get asked, why are you running, what are you running from? And then, I mean, speaking completely candidly from a cultural standpoint, either we sprint or that's it.
Yeah.
Long
Yeah.
distance running was just that. But I never went out in the woods. I never, I
Totally.
had a tree that we hung, but I think that there is something beautiful about that nature aspect. And you talking about the destinations that you've been to. And I feel like if I was to take myself out of that fear, out of the stigmas that I have in my own head about trail running and just experience it for what it is, I feel like I could go out there and give it a shot. Now I'm not doing a 50K. I ain't got all that now, but
You could do
but it is.
20K. That's
I
a
would
good one.
I could do that. That would be reasonable, and I think I'd be willing to try. I think thinking from it from a childhood perspective kind of gives it a good light to it.
Well, let me
Because
recommend a race for you right now.
okay,
Mammoth Trail
bet
Fest in September. That's your
September.
one.
Oh shoot, where's it at?
It's in Mammoth, California, which is between like Yosemite and Sequoia. It's on the Eastern Sierra. I mean, I'm biased because I'm, here in California, but I think it's the most beautiful mountain range maybe in the world. And Mammoth Trail Fest is a vibe. I think you would have a lot of fun. 26K. I know you
20.
got that in you.
Oh yeah, we could do that. We could definitely do. I just wrote it down. So, and if it's beautiful too, I could be convinced
It's
otherwise. If
epic.
it's that's and that will be the key for me. That's how I did my first marathon. I was like, we have good marathons here back home, but I'm like, for my first one, I've got to go somewhere that's going to really light that fire for me, and that's how Chicago was for me. So,
Cool.
I'm gonna hold you to that. If I were going
Dude,
out
I'm
there
signing
and
off right now.
oh man, yes,
I'll
I wrote it
put my
down
name on
too.
it.
And then if you heard any clacking, that's me typing. So we got it in, we got it locked into the books. So
Cool.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Now, my last question to you, but before I get to my last question, again, I always like to make sure that I recognize the guests that we have here for what we do. I'm a strong proponent of choice. I'm a strong proponent of representation, and I was truly, I think it was more, I thought it was really cool when I met you. I'm just like, man, this guy's really cool. His blade looks cool. He's like so fitting. Like, this guy looks pretty dope. And it's just like, but as I got to do more digging about what you do in the act in the see my words are wording again, but that's okay. But your proactive nature in the community, you again, you were down at the Rising Heart, so you're a boots on the ground kind of guy. You're creating different opportunities for para athletes and adaptive athletes. You're not only just being on the course, but you're also making a way for others to follow in your footsteps. And I, for one, applaud you and I admire the work that you do. And I may not say it much. I sometimes lurk in the shadows on Instagram and things like that. But I watch a lot and I am truly impressed by the work that you've done, looking behind into your history as well, the accomplishments that you made, the ability that you made that pivot from going, because training for Paralympics is not easy. Like I people, it's not just a whim that you go out there and do that, but you train for it, but then it didn't work out, but you still found something else. You still found the joy. And not only that, you bring that same joy and you try to create that same opportunity for others on the trail. And as much as I disdain trail, like I talked about it before, I have a respect for the skill it takes for it. And like I said, we're going to look into that race regardless, but I digress. I want to make sure that I thank you for that work because there's a choice involved in that. And you choose to take your skills, your wisdom, your knowledge, and you give that for the world. And I think that shouldn't be taken lightly. So I'm sure
Thanks,
others
man.
have told you, and I hope they do. I'm always a firm believer of tell people you appreciate them when you have the opportunity. And again, I watch from the depths of shadows like Batman, but I have always been impressed and inspired by what you do in the space that you're in. And just want to tell you thank you for what you do. It truly has inspired me to continue into the safe space stuff and moving into that lane, but also being willing to appreciate everyone else in this space and recognize them for that. So for that, long story short, thank you for what you do.
I appreciate that, man. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It brings me a lot of joy to be able to be that person and just giving opportunity. I think once I made the connection that creating opportunities for other people was something that I could do, it was just a no brainer. Like, why wouldn't I want to do this? And it just naturally kind of started happening. And then, I meet a person like Jordan, who
Mm.
was the founder of Rising Hearts, and seeing her and her work. So I've met a lot of cool people along the journey that are also doing the same thing. So it was just kind of like a natural flow.
Yeah, it is. And you fit right in. And like I said, you inspire others who are watching. Like I said, you've inspired me. And like I said, TRE was such a pivotal moment in my journey in this space. And it really came down to the people like yourself that I met down there who gave me the opportunity to speak. If that makes sense. I feel like it
Yeah.
was, I went to talk to you and you were just welcoming. Not everyone's like that. And you just had that spirit to you to just like, hey, I'm here. And the panel that you guys had about that is just
That was a good
it
panel,
made
wasn't it?
it was a really good panel. It was a
Yeah.
really good panel. I have to send you the video to that because I recorded it all actually, and
Okay.
I have to send it over to you. I sent it to Jordan, but I digress. We'll talk about that on. But I have to. Yeah, we'll figure out a way to get it to the max because it was such a good panel. I strongly encourage people to check it out. I hope it's on Rising Hearts page. I don't know yet, but it was such a good panel. But my last question is always my favorite question. Is My heart has always been around to those who are first entering into into the running and walking space, whether it be road racing, whether it be trail running, whether it be, walking an ultra marathon, who cares? If it's your first time doing it. So my question to you would be, what is one piece of advice you would give somebody who is entering into the space?
Be kind to yourself and don't judge where you are. Just show up right as you are and just keep going.
I love that. I love that. Grace is one of my biggest things I like to employ. So being kind is so crucial. So Zach, I can't thank you enough. I give you my accolades, but I tend to thank people all the time, at least 100 times. Ask my wife. I tell her, we tell people thank you 1,000,000,005 times. But truly, thank you so much for your time. For
Yeah,
those
my
that are
pleasure.
listening, please check out his Instagram page. Check out Born to Adapt. I guarantee you that you will walk away inspired. But Zach, I can't thank you enough for your time. I appreciate you and I appreciate what you do.
Thanks, bro. I really appreciate you having me on.